Welcome, everybody, to Rico 12. I'm Justin B., your host and a child of an all powerful and perfectly loving God, and an addict living in the miracle of recovery one day at a time. Rico 12 is all about exploring the common threads of addiction and sharing tools and hope from those on a similar path. We gather from diverse backgrounds, faiths, and places to learn and support one another. Our speakers are members of various fellowships, addictions, and afflictions, thus showing the common threads of recovery no matter our addiction or affliction. Today is meeting number 315 of the Rico 12 speaker meeting, and today's speaker is Tomas K., a first-time Rico 12 speaker, and his topic today is Finding Freedom from Internet and Technology Addiction. I look forward to hearing that message here in a few minutes, but first for a little bit of business. Rico 12 has several recovery resources in our family of podcasts and social media communities. To learn more, listen more, connect more, or just hang out and learn and grow with us, you can check out the other podcasts that you'll find at rico12.com. That's RECO12.com. And to join our social communities, you can check out the chat and the show notes. I'll put information in there. Rico 12 is self-supporting, and your contributions help us continue our mission. Thank you to all of our spearheads, past, present, and future. And a special thanks this week goes out to Debbie and Vivian. Thank you so much for your generous donations this last week. If you out there also feel the desire to become a spearhead and support this cause, visit rico12.com/support or click on the links in the show notes and the chat that I'll put out there for one-time or monthly donation options. Your support, not just financially, but with your word of mouth, makes a big difference in keeping us being able to share these messages of recovery. We look forward each meeting to receiving from the light reflected from our speakers. That light inspires hope, meaning, worth, and growth in us, the listening audience. Now I'm going to introduce our guest speaker for today, Tomas K., and give just a little bit of background information on him. Tomas has been a member of Internet and Technology Addicts Anonymous for 8 years and has been continuously sober from all of his compulsive internet and technology behaviors, including social media, streaming, video games, porn, and more, for over 5 years. Despite being high functioning in many areas of his life, his increasingly frequent and painful bottoms with technology were driving a suicidal despair, which seemed to offer no way out. After initially facing immense confusion and grief in early recovery around what a changed relationship with technology might look like, his experience discovering sobriety and working the steps in ITAA has led him to a life of connection, fulfillment, and peace that exceeds anything he ever found in the screen. Take it away, Tomas. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Justin. Really quickly, I lost audio for 1 second, but so will you remind me how much time I have?
Yeah, you've got about 25 minutes till the bottom of the hour. And okay, if you'd like, I can give you a 3-minute or whatever warning if you'd like.
That would be great. A 3-minute warning. I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Tomas.
Hi, everyone. I'm Tomas, Internet and Technology Addict. And I want to start by just pausing and letting my higher power into this room, and that might guide my words. And just my hope will be that something I say is something someone needs to hear today. So I'm just going to take a moment to pause. So it's nice. Thank you again so much for inviting me, Justin. And it's kind of nice that this falls on Valentine's Day, which is a day about connection, and was certainly a very painful holiday for me in the past, because I felt so isolated and so disconnected from other people. And a big part of that was, my addiction, which, paradoxically, so much of the promise of technology is that it can help us be more connected to other people, more connected to the world. But really what I was experiencing was the opposite. It was like that sense of ease and comfort, that sense of connection, but not true connection. I was actually just becoming completely disconnected from myself, from who I truly was, from the people around me. And it was much easier to connect with people on a screen who never had to know who I was than it was to connect with myself and my higher power and the people who could actually love me. So I think I'll start by just telling my story a little bit. I uh, grew up really from an early age. I was born in the early 90s and, had kind of screens around me from childhood. And they were always kind of this sort of a magical thing when, we got to go to the movies, or there was like an arcade we got to go to, or I could go to my friend's house to play video games. It was kind of like this special, exciting activity or world that I got to spend time in. And as I was getting older, I think, I began to spend more and more time using technology in a way that maybe other kids felt like weren't necessarily. And so when I was around 10, we got the internet, and, I would, every time my mom would leave the house, I would go and try to spend time on her laptop. I began procrastinating in school, and and I think for me, part of my story is I experienced some pretty severe abuse when I was a child. My parents divorced when I was very young, and in a way that, as a child, I really couldn't understand or grapple with. There was a lot inside of me that was very, very frightening, and a lot outside of me that was very, very frightening. And what the kind of screens offered me was, a sense of safety, essentially a sense of control. I could choose where I went, what I did, how I felt, what I saw, and nobody could see me. I felt this kind of invisibility that was very, very soothing. And, the kids at school were very intimidating. People would make fun of me, or I'd make mistakes, and no one could laugh at me on the internet because no one could see me. And I didn't think of any of that. I just liked it. I enjoyed it. And, as I was really getting into middle school, I got into the cycle of like procrastinating on things, and then, staying up late, and then like, I'm having this mounting anxiety of I'm supposed to do X and I haven't done it yet. And I am waiting until the last minute. And then, I started faking sick so that I didn't have to go to school. I would wake up in the middle of the night after my family had gone to sleep to sneak downstairs and, use the computer. And that kind of continued throughout high school, just this cycle of procrastination and anxiety and fear. And then, at the last minute, just saying like, okay, cut it out. Like, it's time to do it. Like, and I put all this pressure on myself, and last minute, whip out an essay or study for a test. And sometimes that worked and sometimes it didn't. But I think I also had this often during those years, this sense of like, oh, I'm kind of like this, I'm too smart for school, or like, this is beneath me. Like, I don't care. I'm only doing this homework because I'm forced to. But like, I had a sort of maybe arrogance, protection. But what really started to change for me was when I went to college, and I was studying something I really cared about and I felt very, very passionate about. And I was still using this mindless bullshit on the internet and staying up until 4 a.m. And I'm paying thousands of dollars to study something I've been wanting to study my whole life. And I cannot stop watching, this mindless, banal stuff. And I was like, what is going on? And that's when I really started trying to control it and saying, I don't want to do this anymore. And I started getting into these cycles of controlling and binging. So I'd say, I'm done. I'm never doing this again. And then, maybe a few weeks later, I'd have a big deadline coming up. I'd feel so much anxiety and stress. I would say, let me just use to take the edge off. Like, I'm just going to take a 5-minute break. And the 5 minutes turns into 20 minutes, and then 20 minutes turns into 45 minutes, and then just 2 hours. And that leaves me plenty of time still, but then the 2 hours is 4 hours. And then, well, why quit here? I might as well. I've already shot the night, so 4 hours turns into 8 hours. And I would have days where I did not sleep. I would be using for 24 hours, and I would pass out. Literally, I could not keep my eyes open because I'm laying in bed and I'm staring at it, and I'm like putting my head down, and my neck hurts. And I'm like, what is this? And I remember I had a scholarship one summer to work on an independent project, and I could not stop watching these stupid YouTube videos made for like 12-year-old boys. And I was like, what is wrong with me? I don't even enjoy this. Like, I don't want to do this. And I would be asking myself in my head, please stop. Like, I'm so tired. My whole body is in pain. And I don't like this. I'm not enjoying what I'm watching. And I would watch my hand move and click on the next video as I'm begging myself in my head to stop. And it was terrifying because I was literally living my dream from the outside. But in reality, it was like I was sitting on hardwood floor, at 5 a.m. watching stupid videos that I didn't want to watch. And there's junk food containers strewn around me. And I felt out of my mind. And that was the first time I thought, is this like what an alcoholic experiences when they take a drink? Because it wasn't like even about excess. It was about like, I'm harming myself and I cannot stop. And at that time, when I thought maybe this is like what an alcoholic experiences, I felt a lot of relief because I was like, there must be some crazy group of people who think they're addicted to the internet. Like, I was living in New York City, and I looked and there was nothing. And all I could find was a footnote on a Wikipedia article saying like some people think maybe this is a thing, and I just felt really, really fucked up and lonely and broken. And I just didn't know what was wrong with me. And so that just continued for a few years, basically this cycle of control, binge, shame, self-hatred, and then starting again. And yeah, by the, end, I was actively suicidal. I felt so much darkness. I didn't still really know how to think about all of this. I felt like I'm depressed. I have depression, and this is maybe like a symptom of that. And I also felt embarrassed thinking about this as an addiction because, I had a friend who was in heroin recovery, and I was like, this is so lame. Like, I can't stop watching YouTube videos. Like, what a weakling I must be, because like, there's people who have real addictions, who are like on hard drugs, and that is like really intense. And like, I'm like this like little wimpy, lazy guy who just cannot stop scrolling social media. And what's wrong with me? And it wasn't until much later that I realized, I think I was a bit surprised because when I was growing up, I got all the PSAs. Like, I didn't really get into drugs. I always drank moderately, and I was surprised to actually find out I did have a huge drug addiction, which was to dopamine. And that the way people who meet the diagnostic criteria for internet addiction, our brains change in the same way as a heroin addict's. The loss of brain matter, the changes in the white matter, the reduction in executive functioning, emotional regulation, it's almost identical. And it's because it is a chemical drug. It's endogenous, it's not exogenous. But, when I was doing that, I was basically flooding my nervous system with dopamine because it took away all of my anxiety, all of my pain, all of my fear, all of my anger, and helped me feel exactly what I thought I wanted or needed to feel. And when I finally came into recovery, which was very much on my knees, and I had another huge bender after 2 months of swearing off and white knuckling. And I had basically, gotten to a place where I was telling myself, if you do this again, I'm gonna like kill myself. Like I cannot do this, which was, it's very harsh, but it was also the only tool I really knew at that time, because I thought the way to respond to the addiction was by like fear and control, and which only later I found out was really just the other face of the same disease. And when I came into recovery, I finally found a group that, after looking for a very long time, and actually I found it, and then I was like, no, this is not for me. Like, I do not want to do this. And then I came in on my knees. And so that was 7.5 years ago. And I haven't played a video game since that first meeting. I just started coming to a meeting every day. But, my problem was much more than just games. And games, in a way, are sort of like alcohol or heroin, where you can kind of it's pretty black and white, But part of what was so confusing for me was how slippery it is. I'm right now on a screen talking to you all on the Zoom meeting. I have my smartphone here next to me. I work on my laptop. I have to check my bank accounts. It's just there's so much of my life where technology is sort of necessary. And it was just so slippery. I'd start out doing something that seemed like a good idea, and 8 hours later, it's like in the big book, it was like I was pounding the bar and saying, how did it happen? I'm back on some crazy rabbit hole watching some, the third documentary about some topic I don't care about. And I'm like, why? Why am I here? And I'm so tired. So, it took a lot of searching around that at first was very frustrating and painful, but over time I became incredibly grateful for, because it has almost required of me to develop a very deep practice of emotional sobriety, to understanding, well, why am I acting out? What am I trying to escape? Because that whack-a-mole, it can happen in any fellowship. Like, you put down the drink and you pick up the food. You put down the food and you pick up relationships. You put down relationships and you pick up weed. And it's like that with technology too. It's like I put down games, I pick up news. I put down news, I pick up dating apps. It just that the disease goes wherever it's warm. And so, part of what was helpful, there was some structure to my practice of sobriety as I discovered it, which was helpful. So, identified certain things that I just cannot do, which when I start, I can't stop. And when I stop, I can't stay stopped. And those include video games, includes porn, any digital erotic content. It includes personal social media use, movies and television, by myself, entertaining videos online, Reddit, maybe something else also. But those are the things that I count days of abstinence from. So yeah, I've been fully abstinent from all of those for the last 5 years. And the first 2 years of my recovery, was a lot of, trying to get kind of a grip on things, and then slipping and relapsing. And, usually after the first 6 months of continuous relapse, I had, maybe a relapse once every 4 to 7 months, which was a miracle. I was over the moon. It was insane that I could go 4 months without doing that stuff. It was crazy. Because I had come to a place where I had basically thought, this is probably going to be the rest of my life. Everyone does this all over the world. It's everywhere. And it felt like, in my addiction, it felt like the idea of being abstinent from this, it felt like as crazy as never again stepping on a crack in the sidewalk, or like never making direct eye contact with someone, or something like this. Like, it's just everywhere. And I just didn't think it was actually possible. But, I think what I learned from each of those relapses was, one was I was trying to, each time it happened, I was trying to take a break from the program. Like I'd take like a week of travel and be like, maybe I'll see what it's like not going to meetings, and I would relapse. And I also wasn't working the steps. I was very resistant to the spiritual dimension of the program, which nobody else was resistant to my resistance, which was so wonderful. Everyone was so welcoming that I didn't have to work the steps. And I was given that dignity and the freedom to kind of go at my own pace and take the tools that I needed. But, after my last relapse at the end of 2019, I said, like, well, let me just try the thing that everyone says worked for them. And it was funny later reading in the big book about being the exception to the rule, because I literally wanted to be the exception to the rule. I just wanted to prove that it's possible. Not that it's wrong to work the steps, but I just wanted to prove that it's possible. You don't have to work the steps. And I was like, okay, let me just try it. And I got a sponsor and started working the steps. And the other big change there also behaviorally was I started practicing only using technology as necessary. So basically, I use it for my work, for recovery, for finances, for connecting with people I love, for anything that is aligned with some important value or purpose or project. But I don't use it reactively. I don't use it for curiosity or entertainment, so that means like I largely, I don't really read the news if I don't have to. I don't, scroll random, websites. I don't listen to podcasts very much. Maybe I'll listen to this one, but I, generally I don't look up random stuff. I just kind of really use it as a tool. And then all of those things that, all of those things that, I was trying to use the internet for, connection, relaxation, I've had to develop other strategies for meeting those needs. That has basically helped. That's been a very useful principle where basically, like if I do use it for something unnecessary, like I look up some random, what does this author look like? I just share about it. And, I share about it with my sponsor and other people and say, yeah, I was using this. I really didn't need to. I'm just checking that in. And the idea is that keeps me really, really far from the cliff's edge. Whereas I think before I was like, how close can I get to the cliff edge before I fall off? Like, can I do this? Oh, no, I can't do that. Well, can I do this? Maybe only under these conditions on this day of the week for this amount of time. It's like all of these rules and, again, just trying to control myself. And now my program is a lot more about just having faith that anything I need, my higher power is going to help me find, and that I don't need to immediately in the moment try to reach for that instant sense of gratification or security or comfort. And so the big part of the steps for me has been really this incredible shift from like realizing that my addiction was not my problem, but my solution to the problem of living. And what I have found in the steps is a much deeper solution, one that actually works and doesn't cause me more suffering. Not in the steps themselves, but more the steps are like a guide for me in understanding all of this buried pain from trauma, dysfunction, fear, harms I've caused people, harms people have done to me, and all the patterns, the survival patterns and coping mechanisms that have come out of that. And, really, for me, the big outcome of the steps, and each time I work them, is how can I live a life where I'm not harming other people and I'm not harming myself. And I had never lived a life like that before. It was all about harming myself. And sometimes that just spilled out into harming other people as well, which only made me want to harm myself more. So, the steps have genuinely offered me a sense of freedom that I did not think was possible. And what is amazing is that today my recovery does not look like, I actually don't really even need to worry about trying to not use the internet in these unhealthy ways, because I don't even want to. The desire isn't there. And I was describing this actually to a friend last night, where it's like, I've never had a gambling addiction. And when I've walked into a casino on a few occasions, and I see people at the slots, and they're in their 70s and 80s with their whiskey, and they're, getting frustrated, or, it's so sad. It's a very, very sad thing. And genuinely, again, I also just want to caveat this by saying, like, I think there's a lot of people who are not addicted to technology, and that's wonderful. But when I see people who are scrolling like this all the time, that's how I feel. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so grateful that I'm free of that. And my life, I thought my life would get very small because I'd be so disconnected from everything. And it's the opposite. I came into recovery because my life felt very small. Is that 3 minutes, Justin?
3 minutes, yep.
Thank you. I felt very small. It was physically actually very, very small. And, I was basically in my room on a screen where no one could see me. And now my life is filled with people who really, really deeply care about me. It was like I had hundreds of friends on social media, but not one of them who I could really call when I felt completely gutted and in crisis. And now I have the opposite. It's like I lost all of these parasocial acquaintances, and I have deep, deep connections with people who I truly love and truly love me. And I have a faith in a higher power that I'm not religious, but in a lot of ways, my practice of spirituality has just become about having faith in the universe, in the world, in what is, instead of needing to control and impose what it should be. And instead just saying, what I have right now in this moment is truly enough. I really have everything I need. Because if I didn't, I wouldn't actually exist. And this kind of faith that exceeds or supersedes any thinking or reasoning that I could do, and just having like a commitment to accepting this moment, accepting myself. And that involves a lot of discomfort. And especially in the beginning, when I was also going through withdrawals and everything felt very, very gray, but has over time just like blossomed into this life where it's like, I don't need to watch other people living life on the screen, because like my own life is pretty entertaining and pretty like engaging and enjoyable. And there's, I get to have my own crises and challenges, and I get to work through them instead of shoving them down into some lower level of my subconscious. So I'm wrapping up, and I'm just trying to think about if there's anything else I want to share. I think just this, that I really did, for a long time, I genuinely thought that the idea of any kind of sustainable happiness was sort of a fiction, maybe of advertising. I just felt like everyone has so much shit under the surface, and like this idea of like a happy life is just feels almost toxic of an idea. And I do actually think one of the things I find so refreshing about recovery is just how open we all are about our shortcomings, our shadows, our weaknesses, our suffering. And yet through that, I genuinely feel like every single day I'm grateful to be alive. When I say my gratitudes, it just comes out. It's not like a checkbox on the list. I'm literally just grateful to be alive. And not only do I not hate myself, but I actually like spending time with myself. Like I really enjoy being with me, and I enjoy being with other people, and I think they enjoy being with me. And I feel freedom, and not just from the bondage of self and addiction, but maybe not just from the bondage of addiction, but from the bondage of self also. Like I just don't feel like there's this incredible pressure on what needs to happen and where I need to end up. And I think when I do a fear inventory and I look at what is the worst case scenario of my fear, it's like, oh, well, this will fail, or that person won't like me, and no one will like me, and I just practice letting myself see that actually everything will be okay, even if that happens. Like my higher power will still have space for me in that future. And there's just this sense of spaciousness and freedom, which is just something I'm very, very grateful for. And I do think, also just the message of like, it is actually possible to not have a dysfunctional, addictive, compulsive relationship with technology in 2025. That's possible. And, it's not just me, but, I know now through recovery, many, many other people who have years of freedom from this. And life is really, really wonderful on this side of the screen. So I'll leave it there. Thank you again. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. I don't know most of you, but I love you. So it's a great group to spend this day with. Thank you.
Love it. Thank you so much, Tomas. I really appreciate it. I've got lots of notes, lots of questions here. We've got questions that have come in from the live audience. A reminder to our live audience, if you have a question for Tomas, you can direct message it to me if you want to stay anonymous, or you can post it in the chat if you're okay with me reading your first name. But first question I want to ask you, Tomas, is, you referenced the Big Book a few times. Is that the core literature of the ITAA fellowship, and is there any other literature there?
That's a great question. So, we're actually working on a basic text now. We do have a lot of shorter form literature, but then because it's a younger fellowship, we also, pull from other programs like the Big Book, the 12 and 12 of AA, the 12 and 12 of OA. We at this stage in the fellowship's life, we sort of leave it to the groups to figure out what kind of literature, 12-step literature they want to draw on. So it's somewhat open, NA literature, ACA literature. But I personally found the Big Book I found the OA literature very helpful. The Big Book literature, at first when I read it, I found it very difficult. But then the second time I read it, after I started working the steps, it was Jim's story actually in the Big Book that really knocked me off my socks, because the story of mixing whiskey with the milk is exactly what I would do in my technology addiction. And until then, I had been kind of saying, well, this is a very new addiction, or we might not need the same, it's probably going to need a different kind of solution. Because it's so new and it's very different from alcohol, and it's a more modern problem. And when I read that, it was like, this is not a new addiction. This is the exact same disease that people have experienced for thousands of years in all kinds of different manifestations and forms. So I found the Big Book very, very helpful.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Tomas. All right. First question from our live audience comes from Marco from Brazil. Marco says, I'm a member of ITAA. My question is, how do you apply step 3 to your emotional sobriety?
Hey, Marco, that's a great question. Thank you. So, step 3, made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of a higher power of our own understanding. Um, so, yeah, I think a lot of my sobriety in general follows from my emotional sobriety. And emotional sobriety for me is about moving out of fear and control and into acceptance. And so when I'm in fear and control, I need to feel certain things or not feel certain things. I need some certain things to happen or certain things not to happen. And I feel a lot of intense emotions that try to aid me in those outcomes. And when I'm in acceptance, I don't actually need to feel anything. And that allows me to feel exactly what I am feeling in this moment, which may be rage, it may be pride, it may be affection. And those all can be very uncomfortable to feel. It's a lot easier to feel what I think I'm supposed to feel than what I'm actually feeling. And so step 3, what is very powerful for me about step 3 is that it does not say, made a decision to turn our addiction over to the care of a power greater than ourselves. It says we're turning over our will and our lives, which is everything we have. And for me, I think a lot of it is actually just, it's almost, the decision for me is more of a reminder that my will and my life are already part of something greater than myself. You know, everything that's happening in my body and everything that has brought me into this place in the world is already part of something outside of my control. And so I think there I basically step out of saying what I'm supposed to feel and just try to really just start from where I really am, what is happening and what I am feeling, and trusting that there's a reason for that. There was something else I wanted to say about that, but maybe also just, not demonizing different parts of my emotions, just accepting them all, bring them all to the table, listening to them. If I remember the other thing I wanted to say, I'll say it. But just the other really important word in steps 2 and 3 is the word care, the care of a higher power, because it's not about self-obliviation. It's not about, okay, I'm going to deny myself and completely hand myself over to something that I have no control over, because that can be really dangerous. Actually, a lot of people, if you've experienced trauma, it usually involves something that you're not in control of, doing something really harmful. But one of the few qualities of our higher power is that it is something that cares for us. And so if turning my will and my life over, is not, if some decision is not caring towards me or beneficial or loving or helpful, then it's not, my higher power. I think that has been very helpful also in terms of having faith in letting go and trusting. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tomas. All right, another question from our live audience. This is an anonymous attendee. Person says, would you like to elaborate on how IT, internet, and technology addiction appears to be endemic? And if you have any thoughts on how this could be affecting nearly everyone, it seems that it's becoming a global health problem.
I think that's true. I think in a lot of ways we're in a similar place to where we were with drugs and alcohol 100 years ago, when, a 12-year-old could go to the corner store and get some whiskey and cocaine. And so it feels like, if we go back to when I first thought maybe this is like an addiction and I couldn't find anything, I think there's a lot more consciousness building around, hey, this is something that can be really harmful. I still think the vast majority of people don't realize that this can change our brains like heroin can. It is very, very powerful, and it's very difficult because, it's not like I'm at the cafeteria and I'm like, serving myself some food. I'm like, oh, that's heroin. I can't have that heroin. I'll just have these grapes instead. It's like, but the heroin is like everywhere. And so it's very, very difficult. And the other thing that's challenging is that most, not all, but most alcoholics and drug addicts don't start using, under the age of 1. And actually now we have, infants who have their own iPads. And so I grew up using technology. I had my Game Boy when I was 6. And so I do think there's, unfortunately, probably a lot of people who need this program and who are going to need recovery. I do think it's still important, though, for me to just recognize that not all people have an addiction to technology. And I think that was something that in my addiction, it was hard to believe because my relationship with it was so dysfunctional and it was so secretive. So I assumed that everyone must have had that too. But the reality is that there are some people who just don't have a problem, in the same way that I don't have a drinking problem. I can have a glass, maybe I'll have a glass of wine once or twice a month. I never want to have another one. And my mom, will check Instagram for recipes and cook them. And, but she's not like up there until like midnight. And so, and there's also a group of people who maybe have a problematic relationship with technology, which is not exactly a full-blown addiction. And for these people, I think things like setting time limits, using a blocker app, journaling about what your intentions are, taking like a digital detox, a break, those can be very helpful for people who just have, maybe like the big book says, like the problem drinker, or I'm forgetting, sorry, the regular drinker. There's another one before the heavy drinker, but, someone who can moderate with enough energy and willpower. And what is different about addiction is that the more willpower we throw at abstaining, the worse the problem gets. It comes back at us tenfold. And we begin bifurcating our psyche into the part of us that is trying to control and the part of us that needs the release and the escape and the freedom. And these just cycle us into more and more suffering. So, and I think all the regular users are becoming a much increasingly smaller portion of our world. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much, Tomas. This topic and this fellowship and your share has sparked a lot here. We've got a lot of questions that have come in. We'll get to as many of them as we can in the next 15 minutes or so. And then any others I'll post in the WhatsApp group, the Rico 12 WhatsApp group, that anybody can comment on with those. But here's a couple of questions from anonymous people, and I'm going to wrap them into one. What would you recommend for someone starting an IT addiction, and how can people find ITAA meetings to attend?
Yeah, that's a great question. So our website is internetaddictsanonymous.org, and we have in-person meetings in towns and cities around the world, as well as Zoom meetings, which might seem ironic, but really, again, our program is not about not using technology. It's about learning what the dysfunctional aspects are. So we have probably 10 to 15 online meetings every day in all different kinds of time zones. We have members from around the world. And generally, what we recommend, like in most 12-step fellowships, is just come to a few meetings. Come to 6 meetings in a relatively short period of time. I found it very, very helpful when I started to come to a meeting every day, because my cravings and withdrawals could be very intense. I felt this incredible pressure in my mind to reach out and just use to take the edge off, and it felt almost cruel to myself to not let myself do that. And the meetings, just connecting with other people, and going to people instead of to technology, was so helpful. So that's usually what I'd recommend for getting started. The one other thing is we have a great piece of literature called Discovering Sobriety, and it's a worksheet and then some literature, and it can help you get a sense of what it might mean to be sober from the internet, because everyone's patterns are a little different. Some people don't have an issue with video games. Some people don't have an issue with social media. So each of us have slightly different kind of addictive patterns, and that worksheet can be very, very helpful for shedding light on what those are for you personally.
Thank you, Tomas. All right. Another anonymous question from our audience. In between getting abstinent and where you are now, can you talk about having difficulties in personal relationships as life got bigger? And how did recovery help you choose connection over isolation?
That's a great question. I would love to say that I've never had any difficulties in my personal relationships, but I probably wouldn't be human if that was true. So that's actually, one of the things that addiction in general is just so helpful, or seemingly helpful for, is just getting out of those really messy, difficult, ugly, painful, tense relationship issues, with friends, with family, with partners. And so a lot of, sobriety has been figuring out, well, how do I take care of myself in these relationships and not abandon either myself or the other person? And so it's required, basically learning a lot more about healthy boundaries with other people, healthy boundaries with myself, communication, not something I was a big fan of before recovery. And I think in sobriety, it has, it's just like, again, like in the big book, like when I'm using, I cannot be present for other people. I'm restless, irritable, and discontent when I'm not on the screen. And actually, so much of my conversations and connections would somehow circle back to, hey, well, what do you think about this movie that came out? Or did you read about that? These things that help me feel like smart, secure, and actually, a lot of now being in connection with other people is going back to what I was saying before, just being present with what is, like, oh, what am I feeling right now? What do they seem to be feeling? What is happening here between us? Instead of like, how does this, feel? It's not like a satellite around this giant global, maelstrom of media and emotions and, information. It's just, I feel a lot more present. And then, going back to all the difficulties, I think that discomfort and conflict are necessary components to any kind of intimacy. And when I lived in such a way that any kind of discomfort, triggered me to want to numb out and go into addiction, it was essentially impossible to build intimacy. And so I think a lot of sobriety has been staying present in those discomforts, bringing it to other people, and my sponsor, like my therapist or other recovery friends, and really bringing my whole life into my higher power. Again, not just my addiction, but my relationships, my friendships, my family, So yeah.
All right, thank you. We're going to get to one or two more questions here. Next one here says, I have used many things, alcohol, heroin, technology, people, which I now see as a chasing of happiness, an incessant need to feel happy or to escape feeling miserable, anyways. Now, when I feel happy, I feel fear because I don't know if this is my addiction or God. How do you tell the difference between, you know, between those things?
It's a great question. And at one point early in my recovery, I felt a lot of grief because it seemed like anything that I enjoy, I do it until it hurts myself. It's like, what's wrong with me? And it just felt like this endless cycle. But one of the ways that I find it most helpful to distinguish between my will and my higher power's will is what it feels like in my body. And so when I'm in self-will, I usually feel a lot of tension, tightness. I feel like I'm in this tunnel. There's urgency, and I'm like really wanting to get through this tunnel, and I'm like pushing and pushing. And that's true in the fear, and it's true in the pleasure also. It's like, oh, like I want to do that, I want to do this, like I want that to happen. And when I feel connected to my higher power, I feel open, relaxed. My torso is, like not tense. And yeah, I just feel like a lot of spaciousness. And that kind of happiness feels very different from that tense, manic kind of pursuit of pleasure, happiness, love, security, which is ultimately feels very scarcity driven for me. A lot of fear is like, if I don't get this, then I will not have it. And this is my one chance to get pleasure, my one chance to get love, security. And my higher power, when I'm connected in that, it's like I hold it with an open hand. It's like, I feel happiness now, and I know this will pass, and then I'll hold the sadness or the fear, and I don't need to grip onto it. So, yeah, I don't know if that answers the question, but that's what comes up.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. All right, Tomas, I think this might be our last question here. Could you please, so for so many who are, alcoholics, alcohol is their drug of choice, drug addicts, food addicts, whatever it may be. When we need to relax and self-soothe, we go to our phone, to our screen. What do you do to relax and self-soothe in those moments that it's like, I have got to escape somehow? Where do you go?
That's a great question. The first thing is that when I feel bad, it's pretty undifferentiated. Like I just feel awful and I don't know why. And so I don't actually even know if it's because I'm sad or angry or lonely or tired or because I haven't eaten anything all day or, like all of these things, they just kind of sum up into this one feeling that I'm very bad at even noticing, which is I feel like shit. And I don't want to feel like shit. And so then I'm like, well, how can I stop feeling like shit? And that takes me towards compulsion. And so actually my number one tool is also to use the phone, but to call someone in recovery and to just say, I feel really bad and I don't know why. And I just start talking about it. And slowly I realize, oh yeah, I didn't eat any food today. And oh, I didn't eat any food today because I'm really stressed out about this big deadline. And I've been driving myself super hard and I'm not taking care of myself. And my fellows in recovery are usually able to hold up a mirror into the blind spots that I cannot see and help me just think of ideas of like, oh, what if you took half the day off of work? What if you got out into nature? Could you go spend time with someone who loves you? And it looks very different depending on what that need is. If I'm tired, it might be going and taking a nap. If I'm lonely. It might be seeing a friend. And we have this concept in IT of top, middle, and bottom line. So, bottom lines are those addictive behaviors that really pull us into runaway compulsion. And middle lines are triggers. They're things that make us want to act out. So halt, hungry, lonely, tired, travel, difficult family, also things like having to check our email a lot or having a big deadline, whatever it might be. And then top lines are, well, what are healthy, functional ways of actually meeting those underlying needs? And so, a lot of that is I have these kinds of basic practices of like offline morning and evening routines, prayer and meditation, daily exercise, eating healthy, going to meetings, or calling someone in recovery every day. And then there's also, how can I do something fun? Like last night I went to a jazz club with a friend. And this is someone I only met a few weeks ago on the other side of the country. And then we were both here and I was like, let's hang out. I wasn't like afraid. And so we went to a jazz club and watched beautiful live music. And then we had a great conversation. And before that, I had seen some other friends for dinner. And so, that's kind of, or maybe I'll go on a hike, or it really like is a lot about attuning into what I really am feeling and needing in this moment. And then, listening to my fellows in recovery and my higher power, and just following that guidance. Because the crazy thing is that I don't actually want to do any of that stuff. I don't want to meditate and go to jazz clubs and, go for hikes. Like that is really like not fun, in the moment. It's like, I just feel like a pile of clay and I just want to feel good right now. I just want to watch this thing or eat this food or whatever. And so I actually really, really need help to take care of myself. Because to my normal brain, unaided, taking care of myself, having fun, building loving relationships is very unnatural. So yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tomas. We've got other questions that came in. We'll post those in the WhatsApp group so we can get everybody out to the rest of their day. But thank you so much for that fantastic RICO 12 weekly speaker meeting, Tomas. If anybody has other questions or we missed your question, come into the WhatsApp group and ask each other that question. Let's have a little conversation here. Responsibly, right? And if you would like to join in that conversation, I've got the links to the WhatsApp group. You can also email me at rico12pod@gmail.com. If you haven't already done so, please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It's a powerful way to work step 12. Next Friday, we are scheduled to be hearing from Melissa T., who was a previous speaker on meeting number 189, and looking forward to hearing from her again next Friday. Stay tuned on the WhatsApp community and on our email list for more information on that. All right. Now, Tomas, do you have a favorite recovery prayer that you'd like to launch us off into the rest of our day with?
Hard to pick, but yeah, I think I'd like to read the prayer I sent to you.
Yeah.
Let me pull that up. Hold on. Okay. Here's what I wrote. May this moment be a refuge. May we find peace and freedom from all anxiety and suffering, just for this brief moment. May we trust that everything we need is right here and right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tomas. Everybody remember there's one who has all power. That one is God. May you find God now. Keep coming back. And when you do, come all the way in, sit all the way down. Let's trudge this road of happy destiny together. Work it. You are worth it.
I've seen stars fall from above. I've fallen in and out of love. I've been been high and I've been low. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. I've seen a boy become a man. He got lost without a plan. He's so far away from home. Now I know I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me, your touch is grounding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone, 'cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. I'm looking for the words to say. You make the world a better place, and I can call that place my home. 'Cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. Your arms surrounding me, your touch is grounding me. No longer searching for purpose all alone, 'cause now I know that I just can't do this on my own. So let me see just what you need to set you free, so we can be. I saw stars fall from above. I fell in and out of love. I got high and I fell low, but now I know that I just can't do this on my own. No, I just can't do this on my own. I just can't do this on my own.